world without life, empty, barren, desolate. Although, yes, there is beauty to be found, but yet there aren't eyes to see and appreciate or even describe it for the audience. So that's why the importance is characters. Without the characters, we can't really tell the other half of a story. So, the Dragon's Bane series, source of inspiration for a number of these characters, really doesn't fall very far from the tree in a lot of ways. So, yes, understandably, there have been visual references, such as my statue of Achilles and of Ares, and even an Inca hunting whistle that all three were kind of sitting off to the side on a nearby shelf, but those relics can only take you so far. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and take it one step further and go ahead and share with you, each of you right now, exactly who all is who once you pull the mask off of the characters within the series. Some of you might be surprised, others maybe not so much. But now it's time for the big reveal. In the age of social media, there is a meme that has been going around frequently that warns people that if you are friends with an author, you run the risk of being included into some of their stories. And never has that been farther from, fantasy than here within this particular series. Starting first and foremost with the character that launched the series altogether, and that happens to be Barrios, the last Minotaur, originally first drawn by my friend Rodrigo Negrera back in 1991 when both of us were bored in our Earth Science class. Who would ever have imagined that asking a question of, do you know how to draw a Minotaur, would become a 30-year endeavor. So, Barrios himself, physically, minus the horns and everything else, though, is actually based upon a very, very old friend of mine by the name of Mike Powers, whom I had first met in elementary school. Then we had lost track of each other for a little bit, only to reconnect in later years through middle school and high school. And this was a gentleman who was on the football team and the wrestling team, and literally, his hand would easily shrink yours if you tried to shake hands with the guy, and nothing but pure brute strength and muscle, to say the least. And very, very easy to imagine putting an axe into one hand and having a set of Texas Longhorn steers protruding out of his forehead without any problem there, to say the least. So it comes as no surprise that the only other picture that I have of him these days stems from him at a rodeo and kind of showing off what he does best. And nothing, definitely describes him further than that. Introduced initially as a villain in the first story, Letarian is the king of the land dwellers, and he's extremely very short-tempered, prone to action first versus relying upon strategy, and really, really gives his all when it comes to coming into a battle situation. And as a personal factor, he actually stems from my grandfather, and in this case, what happened is that, I had the very, very fortunate opportunity growing up, not only being surrounded by history and literature books, but also being able to experience history head on as well, too. So in my grandfather's case, he always talked about his time in serving in the Pacific Campaign during World War II, and how initially he had enlisted in the service with some of his closest friends, and unfortunately before deployment he got sick, and so his buddies ended up getting shipped over and were actually assigned to the USS Arizona. And once the news had official on the attack on the 7th of December in Pearl Harbor and the loss of the Arizona, he ended up actually putting out a personal vendetta against the Japanese. And so he was deployed into the Pacific, and during the Battle of Guadalcanal in over near Iron Bottom Sound, he ended up earning the nickname of Trigger Happy Harry because he had actually swung his anti-aircraft gun hard enough with enough force to break the bolt, causing it to do a full 360-degree rotation, and unfortunately blew off the first 10 feet of his own ship's smokestack during the course of the battle. So, understandably, it made for a very simple source of inspiration on developing the personality of Letarian. Sworn enemy to Letarian, Caravax is the king of the Hawk people up in the region of Wondrous Peak, nestled at the highest point in the world of Mysidia. And as a leader, he is more very strategic, extremely reserved, but relies more on tactics than action than anything else. Now, pulling back on the mask there, shall we say, while my grandfather always talked about his experiences in the Pacific campaign of the war, my great uncle Johnny actually only in snippets would share his experiences on the European front. And whenever he would come down for winter and stay at his condo here in Pompano Beach, um, ironically enough, in the cafeteria that they had in the condo community was a giant mural replicating a scene of prisoners being sacrificed, featured in the carvings of Bonampak over one of the capital Mayan cities. So not only was I able to learn about experience during the war, but even visually, years before the series itself was even brought into inception, there were a few ideas that were already kind of bouncing around in the back of my head. Introduced later in the series is another character that I happen to really enjoy creating, and that is a knight by the name of Carpe Mangia. Yes, that's a very strange name. However, that is actually my good friend Anthony Mangiacapra's last name spelled backwards. Anthony, when I knew him back in high school, uh, he came from a family of tailors, and so he was extremely immaculately dressed, exceptionally fantastic as an artist, and just had an air of mystery around him. And so once it came to revising the story and even bringing in some of the characters up to modern standards, I was very fortunate enough to have met a master illusionist by the name of Ron Fitzgerald, and his shows and just his stunts and charisma really drew an impact on me from the writing perspective. And so I decided to go ahead and snap a picture of him and send it over to the illustrators, and kind of give a general overview of what I was looking for. That's about as much as I'm going to share on this, because there are a few other surprises surrounding this character that I will wait and let you reveal and discover for yourselves. One of the people I was very fortunate enough to befriend in high school was an extremely talented and exceptional visual artist, especially of wildlife, with a huge interest in tigers in particular at the time. Her name is Rayut Cohen, and when I was creating the character of Joriana, physically, I was looking for somebody that would be very exotic, very alluring, kind of almost like the Mata Hari of the fantasy genre. And so, fortunately for me, when I spoke with my friends who were the illustrators, I really did not have to go very far. I just happened to drop Rayut's name, and response was, "Oh yeah, we know her. We got this. Don't worry." So, lo and behold, we have Joriana, the infamous temptress that's initially started the 10,000 year civil war. As a character, I have always envisioned dragon claws to be not only a mentor to Philip, but also as well to a fish out of water, given the fact that he is of a dragon and human origin mixed up in a world that is culturally far different from his own. So now, as a personal factor, once again, being a very close friend of mine, this is actually based off of my good friend Dennis. Now, Dennis has always been extremely supportive of every one of my endeavors and has always made it a point to be either present at one of my lectures or presentations or assist on any museum exhibitions, even collecting book sales for me as well too. However, he also does have certain little tendencies that, in one sense, reminds me of the famous quote from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, talking about Brody, the museum curator who got lost in his own museum once. And I had actually was able to witness a similar thing during the course of a book signing when Dennis called me while standing 8 feet in front of me with his back towards me, telling me that he could not find the bookstore that I was at for that present time. And even when I told him turn around, and he did, he was still not looking straight ahead, but more to the left. So we had to give a series of directions, such as look left, look to your other left, look for the waving hand in the front, look for my wife gesturing to you with a copy of the book. Okay, there we go. Now you see us. That's good. Okay, now walk forward. So, understandably, that particular memory became ingrained while developing the personality behind this lovable character. In the course of revising and rewriting the series, back in the early 2000s there and such, just like with anything else on the creative sense, life got in the way of things. And so in this case, it was more of a blessing as it was able to bring into the series my first strong female protagonist, Vicaria, who is of a clan of nomadic tribesmen. And well, once again, kind of pulling back on the mask again, shall we say, what we actually do have no other is my wife, Cynthia, who I always call my shield maiden. And throughout most of those who have seen my early books, I always have her as the first person in the dedications, simply because of the fact of her patience with living with an author. And the fact that 9 times out of 10, dinner would be at 4 o'clock in the morning because I accidentally spent the night writing and working on a chapter and such, but never complained. And obviously, yes, opposites do attract one another. We are polar opposite on so many things, but yet we still have many, many common interests. And also, yes, ladies and gentlemen, we do have his and hers sword blades. And yes, she is equally matched and, to a T, without a doubt, Vicaria. This finally brings us to the final person, infamous Vericon, the salesman and tradesman that is free to roam the world of Mysidia as its own sole proprietorship distributor under a complete auspice of a neutral personality. So, being able to sell practically anything and everything to everyone actually made the idea and the person in particular a whole lot easier. And I'm very, very fortunate enough because, at the time of this particular video, right now, he is still a semi-up-and-coming actor. However, in the coming future, you're going to be able to see him in the Ballad of Lucy Sands, as well as also multiple theaters over in the United Kingdom. And that is, of course, my very good friend, actor Mark Allen Pilgrim, who, between the two of us, have a tendency of not only throwing out zingers towards each other, but I've had the extreme pleasure of being able to witness him practicing and rehearsing his lines, as well as receiving pointers from an actor's perspective in the course of writing some of my own scripts. And what better way of saying thank you for all of your contributions than by adding and incorporating you into the series itself?
Hello there. My name is Mark Allen Pilgrim. I'm an English stage actor. I've known William Brower now for over 10 years through the Titanic community more than anything else. I joined with a Titanic community because I initially worked with a man who was in Roy Wall Baker's film, A Night to Remember. His name was Jack Watling. He was a stage director, he was a theatre director, and I worked with him in the late 90s. Not long really before he passed away. And that's how I initially come to know William, as I say, through a Titanic group. Over the years, or within a short while actually, he knew that I was a stage actor. He knew that I also write my own material. I've written a couple of one-man shows and things along those lines. But ultimately, the great thing about William is he's often used me as a sounding board. He's come at me with an idea and he said, you know, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And similarly, I've done the same with him, you know, even if it's just a joke that I've written for a play, you know. Over the years, I've been lucky enough to work on first rights, you know, plays that have been written specifically for a first performance, and I've been cast in that first performance in, you know, live on stage, intimate dinner theatre type engagements. And so I don't know, I think he trusts my opinion if he sends me something that he's turned into a script. I've often told him that I tell people, as an actor, I tell people to read their work out loud. There's so many times where you get a script and you read it and it doesn't make sense, or it hasn't got the right rhythm, or it doesn't gel together the way you have to do a lot of work as an actor to actually make it work, even though really the work should be done for you and you should just be bringing it to life. And I never had that problem with anything that William sent me, as I say, when he's using me as a sounding board. But he initially sent me this Dragon Bane's work, and he said, have a read of this. And I said, well, no, I don't think it'll appeal to me, mate. I really don't, because I've never been one for fantasy. You know, dragons and witches and wizards and all that. I was never a fan of Harry Potter, and he knows we're more or less the same age. Even when I was a kid, I was never a fan of Star Wars. You know, I was more of a Where Eagles Dare or Jaws kind of guy when I was a kid. But he just said, "Now, please read it. You know, you might not enjoy it, but let me know what you think of the characters and the world that I've created." So I took it away and I read it. And actually, I got into it. Surprisingly, I did actually wonder whether or not I would like it, but I actually did really enjoy it. The way that he's written those characters is, certainly if it ever goes into production on the stage or for cameras, the way he's written it, he has done an actor's work for them. As a reader, you can get it in your mind's eye. The pictures are there, the world that he's created, the boundaries and the different pockets of civilization and how they interact with each other and how certain characters interact with each other. The work is there, and as I say, reading it in a novel form was something pretty special, and then to read it as parts of scripts, it's really, 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 really well put together. The creative genius of this man is mind-boggling. Obviously, I'm used to the great playwrights. Yeah, Shakespeare doesn't even need to be mentioned, but people like Bertolt Brecht or Konstantin Stanislavski. Who else? Tennessee Williams, of course. Yeah, your side of the pond. And then, of course, the authors as well, the novelists. Mark Twain, Charles Dickens, you know, Jane Austen, and people like that, you know, the classics, du Maurier. So to actually have that much impact on me as the written word, it does take a hell of a genius to put something that good together. And I believe that Word had to make it into a series, into something that people would sit down with their families and stick on the television or go to the theatre and watch on the big screen. I think it would be quite endearing. Yeah, the characters will play out like they do in Star Wars. Again, I don't like Star Wars. I've never been a fan of Star Wars. I'm not saying it's a bad film. I'm just saying it's not my thing. But one thing that is magic about Star Wars is the characters. You know, those characters went on to become toys. You know, so it's possible that this could do that. I really do think it is quite possible because the work has already been done. The man has created this world for you. He's created these characters. And all he has to do is to share them with an audience. And it's an audience that, with the success of things like Game of Thrones and, you know, even things that aren't fantasy, even things that, you know, that just run really well as serials, where, you know, like 24 or, you know, Prison Break, things like that, things that people find addictive. It would be in that vein. I really do believe it will be in that vein if the production is that good. It's a wonderful piece of work, and William Brower is a very, very talented writer, not only with what he's written here, but as I say, all these little bits and pieces he sent me over the years. His use of the written word is pretty astounding, you know, and to read the things out loud and to get the pronunciation of certain words right and all that kind of thing, it is so well conceived, and it's all glued together, and the characters are just utterly fantastic, very deep, very rich. The motives are there, mannerisms are there. All the little bits and pieces that you need to put on a stage or on a screen are there in the text. All somebody has to do is do the work and look for them. And he's clearly read it out loud. He has read it out loud. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank William Brower for giving me the opportunity to have been one of the first people to read this work. And hopefully, yeah, I don't like Star Wars, and I'm not going for Harry Potter, but I'd certainly watch this. I would watch this. This will be good. Thank you.
A quick added bonus one for one more round, like I say, the encore presentation. I do want to share just a few quick little memories and snippets here, as this is something that has been asked to me a few times over the years, and that is, you know, what do I do outside of just developing the world and the characters? How do I imagine some of the scenes? And so, you know, to start with, as you can tell, like here, this is a sequence that shows both Dennis and I actually sword fighting in the parking lot of Dunkin' Donuts. And yes, it's kind of a little tidbit of town entertainment. So, understandably, most of the police officers on the night shift know of some of these exploits, and still even bring it up years later, to say the least. So, other than that, when we were first organizing this back in high school, I've had a few people that, you know, like Paul Valdez working with the soundtrack, and again, Rodrigo and Dan Sacro, among others, from my illustrators. You know, between all of us, we would often joke about the Spaceballs syndrome, and you know, imagining a whole line of toys, action figures, and things along those lines. And some of the items that they actually had recommended that I try to organize that would help them in the long run creatively was to match the character to random celebrities. In the event that this were ever to become a movie, or even a TV series. And so, lo and behold, 30 plus years later, some of these notes still exist. But obviously, there are certain things that do require some upgrades. Let's start with, for example, we don't have the up and coming actor Matthew McConaughey anymore. Nor do we have the inveritable Morgan Freeman just fresh from driving Miss Daisy. So, still expect to see anything of that sort, but it's still humorous to look back at it. So, once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for everything.